History is full of secrets, some so shocking they've been buried deep. From government cover-ups to unsettling experiments, these revelations challenge what we think we know. Buckle up, because we are going to uncover something they found but never wanted to tell us. So what would you do if you needed to study the effects of radiation on human bodies but didn't want to deal with paperwork? Simple. You take the bodies without asking. And that is exactly what the US government did under the banner of Project Sunshine. Project Sunshine began in the early 1950s during the Cold War. The government was eager to understand how radiation from nuclear fallout would affect humans. But there was one major problem. They needed human cadavers for testing. Instead of obtaining consent from families, researchers turned to a shocking method. They harvested bodies without permission, 900 to be exact. Many of these cadavers came from deceased infants and children. Some were even taken from hospitals. The government justified this by saying they needed to understand the impact of nuclear testing on the population. But the ethical implications were horrifying. Families had no idea their loved ones' bodies were being used for experiments. The scientists dissected these bodies, analyzing how they reacted to radiation. They measured tissue damage, the effects of radioactive isotopes, and more. It was a macabre and chilling way to gather data. The government thought it was justifiable science, but the families affected were left in the dark. The truth came to light in the mid-1990s when President Bill Clinton formed an advisory committee to investigate Project Sunshine. In 1961, humanity achieved one of its greatest milestones. Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into space, marking a monumental victory for the Soviet Union during the space race. His mission made him an international hero, and his name became synonymous with space exploration. But what if I told you that Gagarin might not have been the first? Rumors and theories suggest that other cosmonauts were sent into space before him, only their missions ended in disaster and were covered up by the Soviet government. These alleged astronauts are known as the Lost Cosmonauts, a group of mysterious figures whose journeys were never publicly acknowledged. Some believe that these cosmonauts were sent on secret space missions that ended in failure, with the Soviet Union erasing all evidence to protect its reputation. One of the first clues to this theory came from Italian radio operators in the late 1950s. They claimed to have intercepted strange signals from space, sounds of heavy breathing, distressed voices, and even heartbeats, just before the Soviets quietly announced failed missions or said nothing at all. One of the most compelling stories is that of Vladimir Ilyushin, a highly skilled Soviet test pilot. According to some accounts, Ilyushin was launched into space a few days before Gagarin. However, his mission reportedly went wrong, and he crash-landed in China, where he was kept under wraps. The Soviets, fearing international embarrassment, supposedly covered up the entire incident, allowing Gagarin to take the spotlight as the first man in space. Another chilling account involves a female cosmonaut. Italian radio operators allegedly intercepted a transmission from a panicked woman, believed to be in space, pleading for help as her spacecraft was burning up. This event, like others, was never acknowledged by the Soviet Union. It's difficult to believe that all of this is pure coincidence. There has to be something there, hidden beneath the layers of secrecy. While we are on the topic of space exploration, let's quickly touch upon another hidden incident. If you're a dog lover, we recommend skipping this part because it will enrage you. Let's take a trip back to November 1957, when a stray dog named Laika became the first living creature to orbit Earth. An adorable dog found on the streets of Moscow and recruited by Soviet scientists became a part of history. Sputnik 2 was the Soviet spacecraft that transported Laika to outer space. At the time, the mission was a huge achievement in space exploration, but there was a darker side to the story. The Soviets were eager to demonstrate their space capabilities, so they sent Laika into orbit without a plan to bring her back. Tragically, she became a victim of the space race. Laika survived for several days and then passed away due to oxygen depletion. At least, this was the story sold by every news outlet. In 2002, it was revealed that the innocent animal perished due to overheating mere hours into the journey. Overheated, cramped, frightened, and probably hungry, the space dog gave her life for her country, involuntarily fulfilling a canine suicide mission. The Soviets knew from the start that Laika would not survive, and her sacrifice raised ethical questions about the use of animals in space research. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA conducted secret experiments that sound straight out of a sci-fi movie. It was called MK Ultra, and the goal? Mind control. Yes, the US government was trying to figure out how to manipulate people's thoughts and behaviors. But here's where it gets even creepier. They did it on unwitting citizens. As mentioned earlier, the goal of the experiment was behavior modification. This was done through a number of techniques, including electroshock therapy, hypnosis, polygraphs, radiation, and a variety of drugs, toxins, and chemicals. The CIA gave people drugs like LSD, often without their knowledge. Some subjects were everyday people, while others were prisoners or mental patients. They wanted to see how drugs, sensory deprivation, and hypnosis could influence the human mind. But the results were often disastrous. Some people experienced intense hallucinations and breakdowns. Some never recovered. What's even worse, the whole thing was kept under wraps. The government didn't want anyone to know they were testing mind control on their own people. Many records were destroyed in the 1970s when the program came to light, but only after years of secrecy. In fact, the public only found out about it because of a whistleblower. The revelation shocked the world. The goal of MK Ultra was to create truth serums, mind-controlling drugs, or even brainwashing techniques that could be used on enemies during the Cold War. But the experiments were unethical and dangerous, often causing permanent psychological damage to those involved. The CIA's own scientists didn't seem to care about the consequences. Although MK Ultra ended in 1973, its shadow still lingers. To this day, many questions remain unanswered. How many people were involved? How many lives were ruined? And did the experiment stop completely, or are there more secrets we still don't know about? Speaking of secrets, here is a financial scandal kept away from the public's eye. The Panama Papers is one of the biggest scandals of the 21st century. In 2016, a massive leak of 11.5 million documents from a Panamanian law firm, Mossack Fonseca, exposed how some of the world's richest and most powerful people were hiding their money. We're talking about politicians, celebrities, and even business moguls using secret offshore accounts to dodge taxes or hide their wealth. The documents revealed how these individuals set up shell companies in tax havens like Panama to keep their assets hidden. This wasn't just a small operation, it involved over 200,000 offshore entities across multiple countries. And the numbers? Shocking. Billions of dollars were funneled through these offshore accounts. But what makes it even crazier is that this wasn't illegal everywhere. In many places, setting up these kinds of companies was technically legal. But it sure wasn't ethical, especially when public figures who were supposed to lead with integrity were involved. It painted a picture of global corruption, tax evasion, and inequality. While regular people pay their taxes, the rich are quietly moving their money into secret corners of the world. The Panama Papers sparked outrage and investigations in several countries. Some high-profile figures like Iceland's prime minister had to resign. Others faced scrutiny but continued business as usual. And despite all of the revelations, not everyone involved faced consequences. So what does it all mean? The Panama Papers showed the world how the wealthy and powerful can manipulate the system to their advantage, leaving the rest of us in the dark. Our last cover-up will send chills down your spine. It will shatter everything you have assumed about some of the most trusted figures of our community. In 1973, James R. Porter, a Roman Catholic priest from Massachusetts, wrote a disturbing letter to Pope Paul VI. In the letter, Porter confessed to sexually abusing children for years and begged to be relieved of his duties before he hurt anyone else. But shockingly, Porter's crimes didn't stop there. Porter's personnel file, later obtained in 1992, revealed a troubling pattern of cover-ups by church officials. Over his 14-year career, Porter sexually assaulted around 100 boys and girls. But rather than facing justice, he was repeatedly removed from his duties by his superiors. After each removal, he was sent for mental health treatment to cure his pedophilia. Despite the severity of his offenses, he was allowed to return to his duties multiple times, continuing to prey on children with impunity. Church leaders who should have protected the vulnerable were complicit in enabling his actions. This case is not an isolated one. For decades, the Catholic Church engaged in a systematic effort to protect priests accused of abuse, shuffling them between parishes and offering temporary treatment instead of real accountability. The Church's priority seemed to be avoiding scandal rather than seeking justice for the victims. But in the 1980s, as more survivors began speaking out, the cover-up started unraveling, exposing the horrifying scope of the abuse. A comprehensive study conducted by U.S. church officials in the early 2000s revealed the staggering reality. Between 1950 and 2002, over 4,000 priests in the U.S. had been accused of sexually abusing minors. By the late 2000s, the church had paid out over $3 billion in settlements to victims. Which one of these incidents surprised you the most? And what other historical cover-ups have we missed? Let us know in the comments below.